Hi, my name is Alejandro Perez Perez, and this is the AI Coffee Podcast. Every 2 weeks, you will have one episode regarding one disruptive aspect of technology and artificial intelligence for the time you drink a cup of coffee. Today, we have a very interesting guest. Welcome, Marzia. How are you?
Hi, Alejandro, and hi, everyone. I'm very well, thank you, and thanks for having me in this podcast.
Marzia Mortati is an expert in design innovation applied to policies, services, and strategies. She is a professor at the Department of Design of Politecnico di Milano University and leads several programs such as the AI for Gov Master, which she has the role of by director, and she was also one of my teachers there. So thank you, Marcia, for joining the iCoffee podcast. It's a pleasure for me having you here. So if you are okay with that, we are going to start knowing you a little bit more. So talking about your personal story, your experiences. So one of the first questions I would have to you, if you could share a little bit the journey into the field of design and why you decided to study in this specific field of studies.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Alejandro. So, my story approaching design and the academic world overall starts from much back in my personal story, because since when I think I was 10 or 11, I started to dream my future profession, which I already decided at that time was going to be to become a university professor. So, not a very typical dream for a 10 years old, but I guess that for me it looked like a profession in which I could really make a difference to the world, providing impactful outputs. So, really, that's what I've tried to do all along my academic career. Which then ended up happening in design specifically, because when I was approaching the university world, that's a discipline that I found to be very interesting, because it was considering the whole world that is man made. So this was very attractive for me, not to study just for producing theories, but really to produce outputs that could be relevant for people and could help people improve their lives. That's why I approached design. And while studying design, I then got increasingly interested in research specifically, because the new future opportunities were the most relevant for me. And then in my, let's say, impetus of wanting to do something that is good for the greater good, so for the vast majority of people, I decided to focus on public services and public sector innovation, which is still one of my main research interests nowadays.
It's a very good topic actually because usually, well, and we saw often in the master, usually the public sector has problems with innovation. So it feels really interesting to mix innovation in the public sector because it's needed. Because, as you said, it affects directly to the citizens and all the people involved in the public. But I mean, how difficult it is, right? So, can you also, I mean, do you feel also that way that it's difficult to innovate in the public, or I mean, can you also explain a little bit about that?
Yes, indeed, this is a very interesting question, not only in theory, but even more, I think, in practice. Certainly, the public sector is an area that concerns everybody. So each one of us should be interested in at least understanding how the public sector works, because it relates to everybody's life, whether we like it or not, in fact, because we all live in such type of system where the public sector and public administrations do have a great deal of effect on our life. And so, for sure, it is in great need of innovation, probably also because it is the interest of everybody. There is a little bit of more let's say, difficulty in changing things that have been going on for such a very long time, especially in places like Italy, for instance, that has a very, very long history, and many other places in the world, of course, that has a very, very long history, and therefore the public sector is built on top of several different layers and legacies of the past, which are bureaucratic, administrative, but also cultural, social, and many others. And certainly this is one of the factors that sort of hinders public sector innovation as such. But then I would say that another very important factor is linked to the very fact that public sector is of interest to everybody, and therefore the public sector is also accountable to everybody. And this huge responsibility that the public sector carries, of this idea of accountability and the need to be transparent and justify whatever action and whatever money is spent, even one penny needs to be carefully justified. It's another factor that very often can stop innovation in this area. But nonetheless, I think that there are many interesting examples and many pockets of innovation that the public sector is bringing forward, which are really the things that we should be looking up to. And there are many governments and public administrations around the world, or even public sector organizations more in general, that do innovate despite all these barriers and very often the lack of incentives towards innovating for civil servants in general. Still, there are many that do, and these are really the examples that we should be looking up to.
Mhm. It is very interesting also knowing your perspective in Italy because, as you said, it's a very the history of the country itself, and also the all the institutions and organizations are older than other countries. But you also have been working in and studying in different areas, different countries. So, what are also your perspectives if you think also to design and innovation in the public sector in other places where you have been living in?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because I think that when it comes to design and also innovation to different degrees and different extents, but equally for both, I think culture matters. And there is no getting away from that. Culture, history, and therefore how these two elements have built into the very fabric of society. These do matter very much, and therefore they are great drivers or barriers to making change, because really innovation at the end of the day for me is about making change, to put it very bluntly. And also design to a certain extent is about transformation, provoking change that we always hope to be positive change, but doesn't necessarily happen in that way, of course. And here, certainly culture and history are great drivers and great factors that impact and modify, even if slightly, the ways in which these processes of change and transformation might happen. And we see these in big transformations, like, for instance, renovating a country's constitution that might happen, more democratically, more inclusively in certain cultures and certain countries, and less in others, across the world, really, or even in much smaller daily things like. I don't know how public transportation is organized, which might be much more efficient in some countries and a bit less efficient in other countries. Um, it really also is a matter of how much the local culture is also used or willing to embrace these transformations. And I think that these factors that are highly related to how we value daily things are great factors that really drive innovation in any sector, not only the public one.
Mhm. Yes, I totally agree with you that culture mindset is very relevant while talking about design and innovation, of course, because even the needs are completely different in one place to another. So it feels, I mean, it's really natural that also the design things, the innovation, the even, yeah, how everything is made is completely different. But there are also some connections, right? So if you take, for example, the, I don't know, Italian mindset of designing, and you go to, I don't know, maybe an American way of doing things, I think it's also a good way also for both cultures to learn and expand and maybe take the advantage of the other. So also, I don't know if you have lived something like that in your career, that maybe if you go visiting another teachers in another university, for example, or something similar like that, that you have, where you have learned about how other people design, because maybe it could be very different than the way in Politecnico de Milano you are doing. So have you lived something like that?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, while I was doing my 5 years of university prior to my PhD, I was a student in this specific program that is called Master of European Design, which is actually a network of seven European universities that exchange design students for 2 years. And this is also a program that I've had the pleasure to coordinate for the side of Politecnico for several years. So I was first a student there, and then I was on the other side of the fence coordinating the program. And as a person, as a student at the time, that really changed my life. That's something that completely shaped how I was, who I was personally and professionally. And then, I'm still bringing that with me today, when more than 10 years have passed, more than 15 probably. But yes, there was a fantastic experience. I had the honor to study for 2 years inside my 5 years abroad into two different design schools in Europe. One was the Glasgow School of Art, where I spent my entire third year of university. And the other one was Konstfack, which is the art school in Stockholm, where I spent my fourth year of university. And indeed, this was life changing. For sure, the way in which design is taught at Politecnico is very different from how design is taught in Glasgow, and then Stockholm is a third version. There are cultural factors there. For instance, the idea that Politecnico is much more of a technical university, is an engineering-driven university. And so also the way in which we give the basis for designers leans very much on engineering principles, mathematics, physics. We study materials, even the chemical structure of materials, and similar things. While in Stockholm, for instance, the approach that I found and that I was very, very lucky to learn was much more of an artistic one. So I had the opportunity there to study live drawing with people that were studying painting. I had the opportunity to learn how to blow glass, for instance, or to work with ceramics. And therefore, there, my sensibility toward the tangible world of objects that we have around us completely changed. Because of this very new approach for me at the time. While in Glasgow, for the first time, I was confronted with much more with the social aspects of designing a solution that might not only be a product or physical object, but rather a more complex system of activities, services, products as well, communication, really trying to tackle the main social needs that we were invited to identify. And for instance, one of the things that I discovered in Glasgow for the first time was the topic of service design, which I didn't know before moving there. But
Wow.
also, uh, the aspect of sustainability as linked to design. Because at the time there wasn't yet so much discussion around those topics, at least for what I had the opportunity to encounter in Milan up until that point. And so really was shaping my mentality and my attitude, and really opened up my horizons to what design is, what design can do, and where it can be applied. Because I was never thinking before that design could serve much deeper social purposes. It can bring a social change, or it could work for achieving sustainable goals. Of course, now these are very common discussions in the design world all across the world, and in the entire academic community, and also for practitioners. But at the time, which was the beginning of 2000, it wasn't, certainly was not like that. So for me, it was certainly life changing.
Really interesting, Marcia. But at this moment, I need to ask you something, and I think it's very relevant. I don't know if you could define design, because, well, before I started the master last year, and I started to understand better what it is, thanks to you and the rest of the teachers. For me, design was not even like a field of study. It was more maybe a method, or even something even less important than actually it is. So maybe for some of the audience, it will be also the same, and they are not even understanding the differences that you have just said before. So can you clarify what's design for you and why it is so important?
Sure. So, of course, this is not easy question. it's,
Tricky
uh,
one.
it's yeah, it's a quite complex one, and typically it takes half an hour at the beginning of a lecture to really go through what design is, and explain all the multifaceted things that link to design. But one thing that we can say for sure, to make it very short,
Hmm.
is to use one of the most popular definitions of design that we still use nowadays, even if it dates back to the end of the 60s, which was given by Herbert Simon, that says that to design is to devise courses of actions that aim at improving and transforming existing situations into preferred ones.
Hmm.
So this definition, even if it's very big and very broad, I think it still really contains all the main ingredients of what design is. And these are that, first of all, design is a discipline and a profession that is concerned with anything that is man-made. So the entire world around us that is made of people doing things, creating things, whether these are tangible artifacts like products, or intangible artifacts like services, which are indeed a mix of tangible elements and intangible ones, to even relationships, or systems, and so on. These are all concerns for design. So that's one of the first things that makes design, I think, very exciting, but also very complex to be explained. Then the other very important point in this definition, I think, is the ambition of design to produce a transformation. So the ultimate goal of design is to work in real situations in the real world. So, for instance, if we had to draw a difference between another discipline that is, I don't know, any discipline, more traditional sciences, those are typically aimed at studying existing phenomena, whether these are in the natural world or even in the society. So, how people act, how people think. Let's think about psychology, how people get to know the world, and so on, or sociology, and so on. These are disciplines that, in very broad terms, are aimed at studying natural phenomena that exist, while design is focused on real concrete situations created by people. And then the ambition of design is to really understand the situations to transform them. So, as I was mentioning before, the ambition is always to create a positive transformation. Hopefully, the design intervention is not a negative one. But then at the end of the day, like in any type of transformation or innovation that we try to make, we never know what the real result will be. So there have been in history design actions that have brought to better outcomes, others that have brought to less good outcomes, so worse outcomes. But that's the ambition of design, not to make things that can create a transformation.
Mhm. So, with this definition, I would say that most of the things could be designed and need to be designed as well. Because, as you said, even a constitution needs to have a definition and a design process before, a co creation process, maybe before, also with the citizens and the lawmakers. So, I think it's very relevant what you're saying, that it's very broad. Usually, the first approach I had, I mean, really at the beginning of the master, of course, it was related to maybe designing objects, designing like, cars or things like that. So maybe of course, there is also a lot of design related to that, but I think there is also a bigger and bigger nowadays part of design which is related to society and services, and also now related to AI. So I would like to know also your thoughts about how design can humanize artificial intelligence, because um, I think, well, you said just before that you can design for the good, or even, I mean, of course, you can design for the bad as well, but you can also make a mistake. So I don't know if you think that artificial intelligence nowadays is humanized design or human-centered design or something like that. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I think that this is one of the very interesting emerging areas of application of design. So I think, first of all, we should mention the fact that, in a certain sense, design has always been concerned with new technologies, because technologies are, first of all, something that is invented by people for people most of the time. And so, because design, in this broad definition that we gave before, is concerned with everything that people make and use, design has always been concerned with new technologies. And most of the time, the concerns that design has had with these new technologies is to translate them for the people. Because one thing is to develop the technicalities of these technologies, which not many designers are capable of entering into, to be quite honest, because we often don't have that very specific technical capability like maybe engineers do. But another thing is to make sure that these technologies are, first of all, usable by the people. And this is, I think, the classical task that designers always had. But then also not only usable, but used in a meaningful way. So, really used for something that is meaningful for people and that, again, tries to reach that positive transformation that we were mentioning before. So that's one thing where I think is very interesting to understand and try to increasingly apply what we can call a design approach to the development of AI and AI-based systems, solutions, whatever we want to call them, services, anything that is AI-based. Because I think that innovation that is meaningful, that is responsible, is not necessarily, I mean, it should not be about the technology per se, but it should be about applying the technology to something that is meaningful for people and therefore that responds to a real need and that tries to help someone. So that's one of the most interesting things where, or areas where design can help humanize AI, artificial intelligence. Because the other thing that we forgot to mention about design is that one of the big characteristics for which design has always been known is for its ability or capability to put people's needs first. So any design process really starts from the people, uh, understanding what the needs of the people might be, but especially understanding what is meaningful for the people that we are designing for. And therefore, based on these, then developing solutions that adopt this or that technology, that's not really the point, but that at the end of the day, even without any technology, really help improve existing situations in towards preferred ones, as we said with Herbert Simon's definition. So that's definitely one area where design can help humanize artificial intelligence. Uh, Also reminding us, all of us that are concerned with artificial intelligence, with any role from making rules and regulations to developing the technology, to translating the technology in usable and desirable systems, that technology is not the innovation, but that the real innovation comes with the adoption, the meaningful adoption of this technology. So that's one relevant area for me. But then probably another area that is also increasingly interesting is to adopt these methods and approaches that design has consolidated throughout now several years of research and practice to understanding problems. Which goes together in a certain sense with the idea of understanding what is meaningful for the people. And that also means to understand what the right problems to be addressed are, or how can we frame these problems in order to address the right issues. I think that this is an increasingly relevant element in any profession nowadays, because it seems increasingly that not only problems are more complex than they were in the past, but that the real skill that we need nowadays is not so much to be able to deploy technologies or run technologies or implement technologies in any solution, but really to frame well where technologies should be used and for what purpose. So, this skill of shaping questions through understanding problems better, I think it's another element that design can really bring, because designers have been known for a very long time to be problem solvers. But let's say my vision is that they should increasingly become problem setter rather than problem solvers. And that's also another area where I think that this discipline can really contribute to shaping AI for the future.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting this last part. You said that instead of problem solving, you are problem setters. And it's good because if we don't have the right questions, we are not going to have ever the good answers for that. So yes, that's a good point of view. And I don't know if you could provide some like examples for the audience to understand better what are you talking about, because I mean you have been talking about different aspects of design that are really relevant, your point of view, but have you been involved, well, I'm sure you were, but can you explain maybe some examples of projects where you have been involved, or your students or someone that you were helping or to provide this mindset of design in a public service, for example, or in other aspects of innovation?
Yes, sure. So there are several educational activities, for instance, in which I am involved, where I do exactly this. So I try to teach what it means and how it can be done to adopt this design mindset to develop services, public services, and then also to include meaningfully AI. So there are several educational activities that I do with master students here at the Design School of Politecnico di Milano. For instance, one course is actually called Envisioning AI Through Design. And that's a course where we, together with a colleague that is an expert in artificial intelligence from the engineering side, so the technological side, we together try to help the students or guide the students to understand, first of all, what is AI, because that's one of those myths that increasingly needs to be opened up and discussed. And then we try to work together with them on understanding how their design skills can be adopted to envision applications, meaningful applications of AI in many different contexts. So, for instance, we have now worked with different classes for 4 years. So this has been going on for a while, and I think that this was also the first, as far as my knowledge goes, the first course being established in a design school specifically about AI. Because we started 4 years ago when the discussion around AI was very much emergent. It was not as widespread as it is nowadays, and there was also much less discussion about the idea that also designers could contribute to these multidisciplinary teams that are needed to develop AI systems. So there we had students working for many different types of stakeholders. For instance, one of the solutions that students from a couple of years ago developed was a news gathering system for journalists that was based on AI to help journalists optimize their news gathering process, which the students found to be one of the most cumbersome parts in the job of a journalist, but also aiming at not replacing the human creativity in that sense. Which is always, and I think increasingly is, one of the discussions when it comes to applying AI, whether it will substitute people and the human intelligence or work together and so on. Or another solution that another group of students developed was for a mayor, to help the mayor understand the impact that his or her political decisions were having in terms of budget and investment on the city. And that was also a very interesting application of AI, because it was really intended to be a support for decisions that then were still going to be made by people. Because this is something else in which I very much believe. I don't think that AI is going to completely substitute human beings and take decisions for us, or at least not the current systems that we know and use nowadays. But then I also teach many other avenues. For sure, the AI for GovMaster that you mentioned, where the program was born exactly with this intention to merge the technicalities of AI and the human component brought by design, to understand how these technologies can be meaningfully deployed in the public sector. And then, yes, I have many other different executive masters in which I participate. One of the things that I also very much discuss in my educational activities is also the role of data, for instance. Which is another concern in terms of research that I have, and that is to a certain extent very much linked to AI, or a certain type of AI. So in that respect, for instance, it's very interesting to understand how the availability of data and big data as another very interesting technology is modifying design practices, but is also modifying how we do innovation, bringing new opportunities, but also hindering other opportunities. And also there, the need to find let's say, a balance there. But then I think another very interesting thing that design brings to this discussion is linked to possibilities to imagine futures. And that's another skill that design has been cultivating a lot since the very beginning. So the idea of creating scenarios and artifacts that can materialize these scenarios in order to help people imagine possible futures, therefore probably and hopefully making better decisions today, because nobody knows the future, of course. Just because the future doesn't exist yet, and the only future that we can have is the future that we make with our choices. So the whole point of creating these scenarios really is to help people today make choices that are hopefully more informed about what might be the consequences of their choices, and therefore acting in a certain way now, where we have the control over our actions, to hopefully see a certain situation in the future. So here, in this specific area, one activity that we are about to start is a whole process of researching and creating future scenarios for how artificial intelligence can or might want to be used for steering toward climate transitions, and therefore helping to reach the climate neutrality goals that the European Commission has set for 2030. And therefore, I think that's a very interesting new area of research and reflection that we are starting to look at. So I don't have answers for this, but I also think it's another area where design can really make a contribution, creating these scenarios and these materialized artifacts from these future scenarios to help us make better choices today.
Mhm. Yes, I agree with you that like sustainability and artificial intelligence, I think they are going to be in debate soon, because not only because artificial intelligence could help humanity to be more sustainable, but also because nowadays artificial intelligence is completely the opposite. It consumes a lot of electricity to be created with maybe the large models of languages that we all know, like ChatGPT and I mean, well, GPT, but the models that are behind these products that we all know consume a lot of electricity to be trained and also to be used. And I also agree with you that even that nowadays these technologies are more in the field of like spending more electricity and more resources than they could be, for example, or we could think about that. Maybe in the future they are going to be helping us to reduce our carbon footprint, for example, and our all the emissions that we produce nowadays. So connected to that, I would like to ask you, how do you see the future of AI and design? Because you mentioned a little bit that you are now starting up a project about the future, and I think it's very relevant also to ask you, how do you see the future of both design and artificial intelligence?
Yes, I think for sure what you mentioned is one of the big debates about AI, but I still think that these debates are somewhat limited because we tend to discuss very often in many different avenues in which I've been or read about. The tendency that we have is to discuss about AI as something that brings more efficiency, or for instance, that optimizes tasks, or that creates more revenues, because ideally this makes it more appealing for the businesses, for the people, for the society, and so on. But I think that other areas where AI is really unfair nowadays are much more impactful in our society. For instance, equity, social justice, the chain of labor, the social rights, and so on. And those are really the new avenues of discussion that we should open up if we want AI to become a responsible technology that really has a positive impact in the society. So I think that my, let's say, my ambition with this little activity that we are starting now about the future is also to start talking about AI not only as something that brings efficiency and optimization, but also as something that can bring beauty, something that can bring care, something that can foster well being, something that can become an advocate for ecological health and ecological well being. Because these are the things that really we need at the end of the day to improve our society. And we all need to participate in this effort. So if AI can become something that democratizes ecological justice, for instance, that's, I think, a very meaningful use that we could make of this technology. So that's where I don't know if I see, but I hope that the discussion about AI and design together can go. And I really hope that this little research that we are starting, which is, by the way, part of a very large project funded by the European Commission called Net Zero Cities. So hopefully, in this way, we'll also have an avenue to make an impact. So that's where I really hope it will go, or at least help start a discussion about technology that is not only about efficiency, is not only about reducing the nuances and complexities of the world and the human beings to sequences of zeros and ones, but becomes so much more and really helps us reflect on AI as something that brings beauty and care to our lives.
Mhm. I'm fully aligned with you with this last part. Yeah, I totally agree that nowadays we have a lot of posts on LinkedIn or I don't know, blogs on and content uh, that links artificial intelligence directly to money, how to become rich in using ChatGPT, and things alike. That, of course, I can understand them. They have a public, and also, I mean, they are important also somehow. But at the end of the day, innovation, I think it's more broad, as you said, and it takes. I mean, it is more in the sense of changing humanity, society, and it's not only of becoming more efficient, because at the end of the day, there is a limit of efficiency, and it changes nothing. Of course, it's better to maybe, I don't know, work 1 hour less if we are able to do the same amount of things. But it happened already with, I don't know, computers, Excel, and many other technologies. And I think that artificial intelligence, as you mentioned, can do much better and much more things than Excel files, for example. And we almost never talk about this, and I think it's very important. But we will see when, I don't know, medicine, for example, is going to be very well impacted, like maybe in the good sense, I hope so, by using artificial intelligence. And why not our actions in the developing regions, for example, also maybe could be affected if we use artificial intelligence for the good as well. And there are like many, many, many different topics, and we could be talking for hours about that. But we are finishing the episode, so I need to just to ask you like a final question, and it is, if you could provide an advice, like a sentence, to someone who maybe now talking about these things, now is interested about feeling maybe following, sorry, your steps in design and artificial intelligence, because I think this is not a very common combination. So maybe can you say to this potential person, um, like a piece of advice?
Yes, so for sure, it's not a very common combination, but I think that increasingly, an increasing amount of people is becoming interested. Sometimes can seem scary, but if I had to give a piece of advice, is I think very, very simply, just follow your passions, and be an optimist. Because I think in order to do research, and exploring new frontiers in research and the topics that are interesting for the people, you need to be an optimist. But in general, in order to be an innovator in any field, you need to be an optimist. So if you are an optimist and you have enough passion, I think you will find a way, because nowadays there is plenty of knowledge anywhere around us that we can tap into, and many different ways in which we can approach people, approach educational programs, learn from one another, read a book that maybe inspires us. So, yeah, that would be, I think, my main advice. Then, of course, there are many educational programs that we've been talking about throughout the podcast, so I will not repeat myself. But there are also many conferences, also for practitioners, that can be accessed. But I think that the most important thing is the personal attitude. If you have that, and if you have enough passion, you will find your own way.
Good advice. Good advice, Marcia. Thank you. And the last questions I always ask to the guests in this podcast is, how can the audience contact you if they want to maybe know more about yourself and also about your background, or have questions about the conversations we have had just now? And the second one is, what's your favorite type of coffee? Because the name of the podcast is the AI Coffee Podcast, and you are an Italian woman. So, yeah, I'm really curious about that.
So, to contact me, I think the best way is LinkedIn. I'm not a great fan of social media networks, but that's the only one that I can manage in my time to use. So, look for me on LinkedIn. I'm there. I'm try to be as active as possible there. So, I really advise to get in touch through that channel. In terms of coffee, I love coffee. I must say, I love coffee. I love coffee in every version of coffee. I've been drinking coffee. I mean, I traveled a lot and I've been in many places in the world. I drink coffee everywhere I go. Because I really love the taste. Even, some Italians say, "Oh, I can't stand long coffee. American coffee is that's dirt water, dirt in the water." I like it because I like just the taste of coffee.
Mhm.
So for sure, but if I had to say, my favorite is espresso. Being
Mhm.
Italian, for sure, Italian espresso, real Italian espresso
I'm not
is my
surprised.
favorite. But I love any kind of coffee, to be honest.
Good to know. I'm not surprised for your choice, but yeah, I agree that if you like coffee, even the smell of coffee is good.
Mm-mm.
So yeah. They
Absolutely,
they
that
should
is enough.
invent I don't know, perfumes with coffee flavor or something like that. Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Marcia. It was a pleasure having you here. I think I have learned a lot, and also I think the audience also while listening to you. So thank you very much for your inspiration and your energy and your time as well.
Thank you, Alejandro, for having me. And yeah, I do hope I was able to give some inspiration to anyone that is going to listen to this.
And also, thank you to you that are listening to this podcast one more week. If you liked it, please subscribe to the podcast. It will help me much continuing doing these episodes for you. And also, if you could provide a like or 5 stars, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye bye.